that's something you need to develop. You need to develop your own little survival tribe, your mutual assistance groups, MAGs as we call them in the prepping world. So there's a number of things like that that you need to pick up and look at. Hey, that ain't rocket science, and I ought to know. But if a rocket scientist tells you this, you ought to take it to the bank. Now, I'm the one telling you. All the others are just, and they're going off and building their bunkers. You look at all the billionaires. What are they doing? Are they waving flags around and say, hey, game's up, go hide? No, they got their mouth shut. They're building bunkers as fast as they can go. So that ought to speak in volumes.
Yeah, where's the location that they're building most of these? Do you have any indication on land areas that they're targeting that might be more survivable or less chaotic then?
Yeah, actually, as you know, a good number are being built in New Zealand. Some of these guys are going down to Chile and Argentina, Uruguay, in the United States. I think Bezos is shooting for Texas, but remote areas in West Texas. What you want to do is look at several factors. I'm thinking I'm going to produce a program down the road to help people with this, to be able to give them a dialed in. I got to work on this. I'm working on a way to do this where somebody can ask me and I can get their zip code and tell them exactly what all the threats are around them in their neighborhood, how susceptible they may be in terms of being in a nuclear target zone from the nuclear power plants, from train wrecks on in factories nearby, crime, population density, and then survival threat side, and look at the opportunity side in terms of resources available, water, whatever they got in that area. That's a tool that I'm going to develop it as a tool and just kind of integrate all this stuff. That's one of my long-term plans is, if the world's still here and that would give people correct, personalized way to deal with all this stuff, the information they really need. I've covered in a general sense. I made videos on bucket zones. I made videos on nuclear survival. I highly encourage everybody to look at those because they do tell you a lot about the location susceptibility and things like that. And I'll probably do another location susceptibility video. But I'm planning to write some material, some books, some pamphlets, or something along those lines. And then I'm planning to develop this tool. That's going to be one of my high-end tools that I'll come out with. It's going to take me a lot of time and money just to do that, but I think it's going to be a huge service to people that are interested in that. But yeah, what you want to be is away from population centers as much as you can. Have resources available by some means. Make sure you can figure out how you want to provision yourself with water and food. Grow your own is the preference, and how you would do that. And also, you don't want to be downwind from a military base, a nuclear power plant, anything that would be a main target. Those balloons, hey, I used to fly those balloons. I attached rockets to them and launched them. And now China has got their own little things they can drop from those balloons. I've covered that on some videos. So
yeah, because so I had these two articles I'm trying to ping together here. So this is off Channel News Asia. Japan's rice price doubles, rising pressure on the prime minister. And then I had this article up, but I lost it on my phone here. There's a billionaire that wants to rebuild the Georgia Guidestones again. So these two are coming back together. So, imagine the societal upheaval that doubling rice prices are going to create. And then we just had the mega floods over in the Punjab area of India and over in Pakistan, the largest rice growing areas are completely underwater. So two major producers, rice gone in certain areas. And that the third largest area where India grows rice is in that same area that was completely underwater. And then now we have already Japan rice prices doubling, and the losses are staggering after the two typhoons hit up in the rice growing regions in southern Guangdong area and southern Pearl River Delta, where they are growing rice in China. So that's three major producers that are down, and we've already seen doubled prices before the harvest even starts. So that's rice. Where does it come from here? No, if some sort of like drop down off a balloon and an EMP only affects a 100-mile area, how much food production processing is in those little areas that could be affected most? Because we're starting to see these little, cracks in the armor here of stability based on food pricing. And it wouldn't take but just one of those events, even over a small area, to disrupt food production that would just send that cascading, like you throwing a pebble or even a larger rock into a very still pond, and those ripples would just go forever.
Well, you could actually reach more area with the balloon and just get it up to a higher altitude. You can take those balloons up over 100,000 feet. And I calculated the radius. I think it's like 400 miles. So you could cover quite an area with a balloon.
400 miles.
400 miles.
Well, maybe the diameter would be over 400 miles. Excuse me. The track of what you could cover. We used to communicate line of sight from different ground stations, but I actually, I got the formula for that, and as a function of height. And I talk about that in my balloon video. I actually show circles on the United States for what they could hit with these balloons. I scaled it so that people could really understand the gravity of it. It's fairly significant, but they could also, bring them down a little bit. Now, there's a certain threshold of altitude that EMP is not as effective, but at the balloon altitude, it's fully effective. And any nuke can cause an EMP, as you're quite aware. But the whole thing is that they could tailor their attack with balloons. So the balloons are quite a threat. I've gone great detail. I'm going to do a book on it. So just stay tuned for that. The book will be, that's one of my next projects, in fact. So, but yeah, I think I sent one of the last emails I sent. I think it's got a link to my balloon threat video. Also, I put a link to my Silverhead News channel where I've got some funny little shorts on there. But anyway, so
the altitude of the balloon that came through that we shot down with a $10 million missile instead of using just guns on that thing. Remember when it came over Canada and it drifted over the U.S.? Like, what altitude was that? And could it have been a threat had there been some sort of payload that you're describing there?
Pressure balloon, but they were flying at a much lower altitude than you would normally see those things fly. That was probably for the payload it had, and so that it could do better reconnaissance on stuff on ground. That was the mission of that balloon. But that thing was about 50,000 feet. You can take these balloons. I've flown balloons to 120,000 feet, and the world record is actually a little higher than that. So this whole idea is, as you get higher, you get more ground coverage. It's just like a radio antenna. The higher the radio antenna is, the more the farther the signal reaches out due to the curvature of Earth, my dear flat Earth friends.
Hey,
Earth is a sphere.
Hey,
let me be clear. Yeah, I got a lot of flat Earth friends, but you can definitely calculate it, and as the balloon flies up, it definitely has that effect. But I won't go into that anymore right now unless somebody just compels me. But the whole thing is that that balloon was flying to altitude it was flying to maximize its reconnaissance. It was picking up cell phone data, especially over those military bases, learning about, they're probably picking up the cell phones, communications of all the commanders and troops and God knows what else. So they were getting quite a load of intel out of that flight. But a balloon like that can fly much higher and be more of an EMP threat. Now, at the altitude it was at, they could have taken it down with an aircraft. At the altitudes I'm talking about, you're not going to take it down with any conventional aircraft-based missile. You would need something like an SM-3 that the Navy has, in their Aegis systems, a long-range missile that could take out intercontinental ballistic missile, essentially. Now, the other thing is that if done properly, you won't see these things coming, or by the time you realize that it's going to be on you, it'll be too close. And that's really what I was covering in that video. I showed how to do it. I showed exactly what warheads you could pick, how you could do the whole mission, where they wouldn't even be detected with the current systems we get out there. Now, that's one thing we need to make up for. We need better sensors to monitor for stuff like that. But I actually showed that. I went through and I just showed you exactly how to build it, basically. So, if somebody thinks it can't be done, trust me, I launched rockets and balloons. And I did it from balloons launched at sea. And that's how I think they would do it instead of one that floated all the way across the Pacific and around Alaska. They just get some of their boats. And China's got more boats than anybody. And you think it's just a cargo ship. And they'd have a few of these off coast, and they could put a lot of these up.
Yeah, I was looking up your altitude here. It looks like 178,000 feet is the world record for a balloon to altitude.
Yeah, that's with a very light payload. So I've got a big balloon. I was thinking about trying to break that record one day with a tiny little picosat type payload. I got a buddy that builds these things. He flies them around the world several times just off party balloons. Oh yeah, that's one of the targets I shot down, by the way. And I was the guy that broke it. On no news source covered this. No YouTube channel had it. I was the very first source that came out and said, "Hey, they shot down a party balloon." Because once I saw the data what they're shooting, I go, I know exactly what that is. And it was by a group called, I think, the Michigan Bottle Gap Brigade that put this balloon up. And I called my buddy Bill Brown. I said, "Bill, is this one of yours? Because this had to be one of these picosat balloons." He goes, "Yes, and as a matter of fact, it was." So they took a Sidewinder missile basically and shot down a party balloon with a little bitty electronic toy underneath it. So I thought that was hilarious. And after some of us spilled the beans on it, they kind of quit talking about it.
Yeah, well, what's the cost of something like that? What's the cost of something like different missiles? What, $10 million a pop to shoot down something that costs 20 grand?
Oh no, what I'm talking about, it cost a few $100.
Yeah.
I mean, those little party balloons. Now, the kind of balloon like the Chinese put, that's $100 grand, $200 grand maybe. I could put up a package like that with power and communications and a big balloon and launch it for, $100 to $200 grand easy.
So is that everybody's fingertips for their backyard launching? The obvious question, are you on shrooms? Illuminated shrooms combining 6 powerful mycelium and a fulvic mineral delivery system selected for their synergistic, restorative, and protective actions. Potent. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, every purchase you make helps keep this podcast on air. So please remember that link's in the description box below. And are you shrooming?
That's kind of the reason I was teasing you there with that balloon there. That one actually got lifted off near me, and the whole area, they went with the UFO thing right away. But it's pretty obvious that you could launch about 12 or 15 of those all in a row, and do some really devastating damage from coast to coast before anyone even reacted to it. You'd have to use something like X-37B or something, to fly over there and take them down. And there would be too many of them if they launched a bunch. Do you think that's kind of where we're going with the I'm going to say global conflict? Because here's this article right here that's basically talking about if they let the AI take over, and every single time in scenarios that they let the AI do the warfare, it doesn't understand de-escalation. It always goes all the way to the end, complete apocalypse. So it kind of shows us that we cannot use these AIs to be in control of things, despite the fact that the countries are allowing that to happen in the form of autonomous drones and warfighters. And these are the same algorithms that are brainwashing your children. It's the exact same thing. And if they go nuts when you give it war, imagine that there's no de-escalation in the programming and dehumanization that it's doing to kind of program the next generation on how to live. Sorry. There you go.
AI has no conscience. AI has no feelings. It has no empathy. It's just a program. But intelligence with no empathy is at best sociopathic. At worst, psychopathic. I don't think AI is with large language models as we have them configured today is going to be sentient. I'm more worried about the man behind the curtain. But the man behind the curtain wires it in and puts it in control of weapon systems, which they seem to be doing for some strange reason. And China's talking about that too. Then you got something to worry about. It may not be sentient, but that don't mean it couldn't blow us all to smithereens. And when you combine that with like the Russians have a system called the dead hand switch. And and this is why we got to be really concerned about war with Russia. The dead hand, I don't know if you remember the movie Dr. Strangelove. It turned out the Russians had a doomsday bomb, kind of like the one in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, right? Cobalt salted 50 megaton. They actually got a Sarbama that goes 100 megatons. Device is believed that it can put out enough radiation to destroy the world. Well, that was what was the basis of that movie. And, of course, Dr. Strangelove, to ask the Russian what the Russian reveals, oh, well, let's set that thing off. He said, well, the whole purpose of one of these things is deterrence. But that would be deterrent. You got to tell somebody about it. Why didn't you tell us? Well, that was the actual scenario in reality. The Russians did have a doomsday device, and they didn't tell us, even after they watched the movie, Dr. Strangelove. So, and we now know it as perimeter or the dead hand switch. When the wall fell, we found out about it, but the Russians still have it. This is it's not a big cobalt salted bomb. What this says is if this system loses communications with Moscow, and if there's any detection, there's been like an atom bomb, it could be a Tunguska event sets this thing off, or some other thing could set this thing off. It launches everything. It's automatically, it's got a rocket it's going to launch. It's going to send a signal to all the nuke systems in Russia and Moscow. Well, not Russia, Moscow, and the entire Russia to launch everything autonomously without a human being involved in it. That's why they call it the dead hand switch. We on our side require EAMs and then a confirmation EAM before a submarine commander just can't launch a nuke anymore. So our system is the opposite. We don't launch without just, all kind of things to enable that launch. But the Russian system, it launches everything. So if we get into war with Russia, that is a real threat.
Please remember civilizationcycle.com and also buy me a coffee /civilization cycle.